HighBridge, a division of recorded books, presents The State Counsellor, a Fandorin mystery, by Boris Akunin, translated from the Russian by Andrew Bromfield, read by Nigel Patterson. Prologue. The windows on the left were blank, sightless wall eyes, crusted with ice and wet snow. The panes of glass jangled dolefully as the wind hurled the soft, sticky flakes against them, and swayed the heavy carcass of the carriage to and fro, in an obstinate effort to shove the train off the slippery rails and send it tumbling over and over, like a long black sausage, across the broad white plain, over the frozen river, over the dead fields, and on towards the blurred streak of dark forest at the distant junction of earth and sky. A wide expanse of this mournful landscape could be examined through the remarkably clear-sighted windows on the right, but what point was there in looking out at it? Nothing but snow, nothing but the wild whistling of the wind, the low, murky sky, darkness, cold, and death. On the inside, however, the ministerial saloon carriage was warm and welcoming, a cosy gloom tinged with blue from the silk lampshade, logs crackling behind the bronze door of the stove, a teaspoon tinkling rhythmically in a glass. The small but excellently equipped study, with a conference table, leather armchairs, and a map of the empire on the wall, was hurtling along at a speed of 50 versts an hour through the raging blizzard and the dead light of the inclement winter dawn. An old man with a virile and imperious face was dozing in one of the armchairs, with a warm Scottish rug pulled right up to his chin. Even in sleep the grey brows were knitted sternly, the corners of the mouth were set in world-weary folds, and from time to time the wrinkled eyelids fluttered nervously. The circle of light cast by the lamp swayed this way and that, repeatedly plucking out of the darkness a sturdy hand set on the mahogany armrest and glinting brightly in the diamond ring set on one finger. On the table, directly below the lamp, there was a pile of newspapers. Lying on top was the illegal Zurich publication The People's Will, the very latest issue from only 2 days before. On the open page, an article had been circled in angry red pencil. Hiding the Butcher from Vengeance. Our editors have been informed by a highly reliable source that Adjutant General Krapov, who last Thursday was removed from the positions of Deputy Minister of the Interior and Commander of the Special Corps of Gendarmes, will shortly be appointed Governor-General of Siberia and will depart to take up his new post immediately. The motives underlying this move are only too clear. The Tsar wishes to save Krapov from the people's revenge by hiding his vicious guard dog away for a while, in a place as far removed as possible from the two capitals. But the sentence that our party has pronounced on this bloody satrap remains in force. By issuing the monstrous command to subject the political prisoner Polina Ivantsova to a savage flogging, Krapov has set himself outside the laws of humanity. He cannot be allowed to live. The butcher has twice succeeded in evading his avengers, but nonetheless he is doomed. From the same source we have learned that Krapov has already been promised the portfolio of Minister of the Interior. The appointment to Siberia is a temporary measure intended to place Krapov beyond the reach of the chastening sword of the people's wrath. The Tsar's oprichniks anticipate being able to locate and eliminate our combat group, which has been instructed to carry the butcher's sentence into effect. And then, when the danger has passed, the minion Krapov will make a triumphant return to St. Petersburg and assume unlimited powers. This shall not be. The wasted lives of our comrades cry out for retribution. Unable to bear her shame, Ivantsova hanged herself in her cell. She was only 17 years old. The 23-year-old student Skokova fired at the satrap, missed, and was hanged. One of our comrades from the combat group, whose name must remain secret, was killed by a splinter from his own bomb, and Krapov survived yet again. But never you mind, Your Excellency. No matter how much a string might twist and turn, it cannot go on forever. Our combat group will seek you out, even in Siberia. A pleasant journey to you. The locomotive gave a long, quavering howl, followed by several short blasts on its whistle. Woo, 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 woo. The sleeper's lips trembled restlessly, and a low, dull moan escaped from between them. The eyes opened, darting in bewilderment to the left, towards the white windows, and then to the right, towards the black ones. Gradually their gaze cleared, acquiring intelligence and focus. The stern old man threw off the rug to reveal a velvet jacket, a white shirt, and a black tie. Working his dry lips, he reached out and rang a small handbell. A moment later, the door leading from the study into the reception room opened. A smart young lieutenant-colonel in a blue gendarme uniform with white aiguillettes came dashing in, adjusting his sword-belt. "Good morning, Your Excellency."
"Have we passed there?"
the general asked in a thick voice, ignoring the greeting. "Yes, indeed, Ivan Fyodorovitch. We're approaching Klin."
"What do you mean, Klin?"
the seated man asked, growing angry.
"Already? Why didn't you wake me earlier? Did you oversleep?"
The officer rubbed his creased cheek. "Certainly not, sir. I saw you had fallen asleep, and I thought, let Ivan Fyodorovitch get a bit of a rest. It's all right. You'll have enough time to get washed and dressed and drink tea. There's a whole hour to go to Moscow." The train slowed down, preparing to break. Occasional lights began flitting past outside the windows, and then widely spaced lamp-posts and snow-covered roofs came into view. The general yawned.
"All right, have them put the samovar on. I just can't seem to wake up somehow."
The gendarme saluted and went out, closing the door soundlessly behind him. In the reception room there was a bright light burning, and the air smelled of liqueur and cigar smoke. Sitting at the writing desk with his head propped in his hands was another officer, bright blonde hair, light eyebrows, and long eyelashes that made his pink face resemble a piglet's. He stretched, cracking his joints, and asked the lieutenant-colonel, "Well, how are things in there?" "He wants tea. I'll see to it." "Uh-huh," the albino drawled and glanced out of the window. "What's this? Klin? Sit down, Michel. I'll tell them about the samovar. I'll get out for a moment and stretch my legs, and at the same time I'll check to make sure those devils aren't dozing." He stood up, pulled down his uniform jacket and walked out, spurs jangling, into the third room of this remarkable carriage. The conditions here were basic: chairs along the walls, pegs for hanging outer clothing, a little table in the corner with tea things, and a samovar. Two sturdy men, wearing identical three-piece camlet suits and sporting identically curled moustaches, one of which was sandy-coloured and the other ginger, sitting motionless, facing each other, another two men sleeping on chairs set together. When the white-haired officer appeared, the two men who were sitting jumped to their feet, but he put one finger to his lips as if to say, "Let the others sleep," then pointed to the samovar and whispered, "Tea for His Excellency. Phew, it's stuffy in here. I'm going out for a breath of air." In the small vestibule, two gendarmes stood smartly to attention. The vestibule was not heated, and the sentries were wearing their greatcoats, caps, and hoods. "Are you off duty soon?" the officer asked, pulling on a pair of white gloves and peering out at the station platform as it slowly drifted closer.
"Only just come on, Your Honour," the watch leader barked. "Now it's all the way to Moscow for us."
All right, all right." The albino pushed the heavy door, and a breath of fresh wind, damp snow, and fuel oil blew into the carriage. 8 o'clock, and the sky is only just turning grey, the officer sighed, speaking to no one in particular, and lowered one foot onto the top step. The train had not yet stopped. Its brakes were still screeching and grinding, but already there were two figures hurrying along the platform towards the saloon carriage. A short man carrying a lantern, and a tall, slim man in a top hat and a loose, sporty mackintosh with a cape. "There, that's the special!" cried the first man, the station-master to judge from his peaked cap, turning to his companion. The other man stopped in front of the open door, holding his top hat down on his head, and asked the officer, "Are you Motzalevsky, His Excellency's adjutant?" Unlike the railway official, the man with the stammer did not shout, and yet his calm, clear voice was distinctly audible above the howling of the blizzard. "No, I'm the head of his guard," the white-haired man replied, trying to make out the fop's face. It was a remarkable face. The features were subtle but severe. The moustache was neatly trimmed, the forehead dissected by a resolute vertical crease. "Aha! Staff Captain von Seidlitz. Excellent," the stranger said with a nod of satisfaction, and immediately introduced himself. "Fandorin, Deputy for Special Assignments to His Excellency the Governor-General of Moscow. I expect you have heard of me." "Yes, Mr. State Counsellor, we were informed by encrypted message that you would be responsible for Ivan Fyodorovich's safety in Moscow, but I had assumed you would meet us at the station there. Come up, the snow's blowing in." The State Counsellor nodded farewell to the station master and tripped lightly up the steep steps into the carriage, slamming the door shut behind him and reducing the sounds from outside to a hollow, rumbling echo. "You have already entered the province of Moscow," he explained, removing his top hat and shaking the snow off its crown. This revealed that his hair was black, but his temples, despite his young years, were completely grey. "My jurisdiction, so to speak, starts here. We shall be stuck here at Klin for at least 2 hours. They're clearing snow off the line up ahead. We shall have time enough to agree everything and allocate responsibilities. But first I need to see His Excellency, introduce myself, and convey an urgent message. Where can I leave my coat?" "This way, please, into the guardroom. There's a coat rack in there." Von Seidlitz showed the State Counsellor through into the first room, where the security guards in civilian dress were on duty. Then, after Fandorin had removed his mackintosh and put his soaking wet top hat down on a chair, he showed him into the second room. "Michel, this is State Counsellor Fandorin," the head of the guard explained to the lieutenant colonel. "We were told about him. He has an urgent communication for Ivan Fyodorovich." Michel stood up. "His Excellency's adjutant, Modzalevsky. May I see your documents, please?" Naturally." The official took a folded sheet of paper out of his pocket and handed it to the adjutant. "He is Fandorin," the head of the guard affirmed. "His verbal portrait was given in the message. I remember it very clearly." Modzalevsky carefully examined the seal and the photograph and returned the paper to its owner. "Very good, Mr. State Counsellor. I'll announce you." A minute later, the State Counsellor was admitted into the kingdom of soft carpets, blue light, and mahogany furnishings.
"Hello, Mr. Fandorin," the general growled amiably. He had already changed his velvet jacket for a military frock coat. "Erast Petrovich, isn't it?"
"Yes, indeed, Your Excellency."
"So, you decided to engage your charge out on the route of approach. I commend your diligence, although I consider all this fuss entirely unnecessary. Firstly, I left St. Petersburg in secret. Secondly, I am not even slightly afraid of our revolutionary gentlemen. And thirdly, we are all of us in God's hands. If the Lord has spared Krapov thus far, he must need the old war dog for something."
The general, evidently this self-same Krapov, crossed himself devoutly. "I have an extremely urgent and absolutely confidential message for Your Excellency," the State Counsellor said impassively, with a glance at the adjutant. "I beg your pardon, Lieutenant Colonel, but those are the instructions I was given."
"Off you go, Misha,"
said the new Governor-General of Siberia, the man whom the newspaper from abroad had called a butcher and a satrap.
"Is the samovar ready? As soon as we finish talking business, I'll call you and we'll have some tea."
When the door closed behind his adjutant, he asked,
"Well, what have you got for me that's so mysterious? A telegram from the Sovereign? Let's have it."
The functionary moved close to the seated man, slipping one hand into the pocket of his beaver jacket, but then his eyes fell on the illegal newspaper with the article circled in red. The general caught the glance, and his face darkened.
"The nihilist gentlemen continue to flatter me with their attention. A butcher, they call me. I suppose you have also read all sorts of rubbish about me, Erast Petrovich. Don't believe the slanderous lies of vicious tongues. They turn everything back to front. She wasn't flogged by brutal jailers in my presence. That's pure slander."
His Excellency had clearly found the unfortunate incident of Ivantsova's suicide by hanging very disturbing, and it was still bothering him.
"I'm an honest soldier. I have 2 George medals, for Sebastopol and the Second Battle of Plevna," he exclaimed heatedly. "I was trying to save that girl from a penal sentence, the young fool. What if I did speak to her in a familiar fashion? I was only being fatherly. I have a granddaughter her age. And she slapped my face, me, an old man, an adjutant general, in front of my guards, in front of the prisoners. According to the law, the tramp should have got 10 years for that. But I gave orders for her just to be whipped, and not to let the business get out, not to flog her half to death, as they wrote in the newspapers afterwards, just to give her 10 lashes, and to go easy on her as well. And it wasn't the jailers who whipped her, it was a female warder. How could I know that crazy Ivantsova would lay hands on herself? She's not even blue-blooded, just an ordinary bourgeois girl. Why all this nonsensical delicacy? The general gestured angrily. Now I'll have her blood on my hands forever. And afterwards another stupid fool tried to shoot me. I wrote to the sovereign, asking him not to have her hanged, but His Majesty was adamant. He wrote on my request in his own hand, "For those who raise the sword against my faithful servants, there will be no mercy." Moved by this memory, Krapov began blinking, and an old man's tear glinted briefly in his eye. Hunting me down like a wolf. I was only acting for the best. I don't understand it. For the life of me, I don't. The Governor-General spread his hands in regretful despair, but the man with the black hair and grey temples snapped back without a trace of a stammer. How could you ever understand the meaning of honour and human dignity? But that's all right. Even if you don't understand, it will be a lesson to the other dogs. Ivan Fyodorovitch gaped at this amazing official and tried to get up out of the chair, but the other man had already removed his hand from his pocket, and the object in it was not a telegram, but a short dagger. The hand plunged the dagger straight to the general's heart. Krapov's eyebrows crept upwards, and his mouth dropped open, but no sound escaped from it. The Governor-General's fingers clutched at the State Counsellor's hand, locking onto it, and the diamond ring flashed again in the lamplight. Then his head slumped backwards lifelessly, and a thin trickle of scarlet blood ran down his chin. The killer unclasped the dead man's fingers from his hand with fastidious disgust. Then he tore off his false moustache and rubbed his grey temples, which turned as black as the rest of his hair. With a glance round at the closed door, the resolute man of action walked over to one of the blind windows overlooking the railway tracks, but the frame was frozen solid and absolutely refused to budge. The strange State Counsellor, however, was not disconcerted. He took hold of the curved handle with both hands and heaved. The veins stood out on his forehead, his clenched teeth ground together, and, wonder of wonders, the window frame squeaked and started moving downwards. A chilly blast flung powdery snow into the strong man's face and set the curtains flapping in delight. In a single agile movement, the killer threw himself through the open frame and melted away into the grey morning twilight. The scene in the study was transformed. Overjoyed at this sudden opportunity, the wind started driving important documents across the carpet, tugging at the fringe of the tablecloth, tousling the grey hair on the general's head. The blue lampshade began swaying impetuously, and the patch of light began dodging about on the dead man's chest, revealing 2 letters carved into the ivory handle of the dagger driven in right up to the hilt. C.G. Chapter 1, in which Fandorin finds himself under arrest. The day got off to a bad start. Erast Petrovich Fandorin rose at the crack of dawn because at 8:30 he had to be at the Nikolaevsky station. He and his Japanese valet performed their usual comprehensive gymnastics routine. He drank green tea and was already shaving while performing his breathing exercises at the same time when the telephone rang. It turned out that the State Counsellor need not have risen at such an ungodly hour after all. The express train from St. Petersburg was expected to arrive 2 hours late because of snowdrifts on the railway line. Since all the necessary instructions for ensuring the safety of the important visitor from the capital had been issued the previous day, Erast Petrovich could not immediately think of any way to occupy his unexpected leisure time. He thought of going to the station early, but decided against it. Why set his subordinates' nerves on edge unnecessarily?
He could be quite certain that Colonel Sverchinsky, the acting head of the Provincial Office of Gendarmes, had carried out his instructions to the letter. Platform 1, at which the express train would arrive, was surrounded by agents in civilian clothes. There was an armoured carriage waiting right beside the platform, and the escort had been selected with meticulous care. It should really be quite enough to arrive at the station 15 minutes ahead of time, and that merely for the sake of good order rather than to expose any oversights. The task he had been set by His Excellency Prince Vladimir Andreevich Dolgorukoy was a highly responsible one, but not difficult. Meet a VIP, accompany him to breakfast with the prince, after that escort him to the securely guarded residence on the Sparrow Hills to take a rest, and in the evening take the newly appointed Governor-General of Siberia to the Chelyabinsk train, onto which the ministerial carriage would already have been coupled. That was really all there was to it. There was only one point of difficulty, which had been tormenting Erast Petrovitch since the previous day. Should he shake the hand of Adjutant General Krapov, who had sullied his own name with a base, or at the very least, unforgivably stupid act? From the point of view of his position and career, of course, he ought to disregard his own feelings, especially since those who should know were predicting a rapid return to the highest echelons of power for the former gendarme commander. Fandorin, however, decided not to decline the handshake for a quite different reason. A guest is a guest, and it is not permissible to insult him. It would be sufficient to maintain a cool attitude and an emphatically official tone. This decision was correct, indeed indisputably so, but nonetheless it had left the State Counsellor with an uneasy feeling. Perhaps careerist considerations had played some part in it after all. That was why Erast Petrovitch was not at all upset by this unexpected delay. He now had extra time to resolve his complex moral dilemma. Fandorin ordered his valet Massa to brew some strong coffee, settled into an armchair, and began weighing up all the pros and cons again, involuntarily clenching and unclenching his right hand as he did so. But before long his musings were interrupted by another ring, this time at the door. He heard the sound of voices in the hallway, at first quiet and then loud. Someone was attempting to force his way through into the study, but Massa was keeping him out, making hissing and spluttering sounds eloquently expressive of the former Japanese subject's bellicose state of mind. "Who's there, Massa?" Erast Petrovitch shouted, walking out of the study into the drawing-room. There he saw that he had unexpected visitors. The head of Moscow's Department of Security, Lieutenant Colonel of Gendarmes Burlyaev, accompanied by two gentlemen in check coats, evidently plainclothes agents. Massa was holding his arms out wide, blocking the three men's way. He was clearly intending to move from words to action in the immediate future. "My apologies, Mr. Fandorin," said Burlyaev, doffing his cap and running one hand through his stiff salt-and-pepper French crop. "It's some kind of misunderstanding, but I have here a telegram from the police department." He waved a piece of paper through the air, "informing me that Adjutant General Krapov has been murdered, and that, you killed him, and that you must be placed under arrest immediately. They've completely lost their minds, but orders are orders. You'd better calm your Japanese down. I've heard about the spry way he fights with his feet." The first thing Erast Petrovitch felt was an absurd sense of relief at the realization that the problem of the handshake had been resolved of its own accord, and it was only afterwards that the full nightmarish force of what he had heard struck him. Fandorin was only cleared of suspicion after the delayed express finally arrived. Before the train had even stopped moving, the white-haired staff captain leapt out of the ministerial carriage onto the platform and set off along it at a furious pace, spewing out curses with his face contorted in rage, towards the spot where the arrested State Counsellor was standing, surrounded by police agents. But when he was only a few steps away, the staff captain slowed to a walk and then came to a complete halt. He fluttered his white eyelashes and punched himself hard on the thigh. "It's not him. Like him, but not him. And not even really like him. Just the moustache and the grey temples. No other similarity at all," the officer muttered in bewilderment. "Who's this you've brought? Where's Fandorin?" "I assure you, Mr. von Seidlitz, that I am Fandorin," the State Counsellor said with exaggerated gentleness, as if he were speaking to someone who was mentally ill, and turned to Burlyaev, who had flushed a deep crimson. "Pyotr Ivanovitch, please tell your men that they can let go of my elbows now. Staff Captain, where are Lieutenant Colonel Modzalevsky and your men from the Guard? I need to question them all and record their testimony." "Question them? Record their testimony?" Seidlitz cried in a hoarse voice, raising his clenched fists to the heavens. "What damned testimony? Don't you understand? He's dead! Dead! My God, it's the end of everything! Everything! I have to run, get the gendarmes and the police moving. If I don't find that masquerading blackguard, that—" He choked and started hiccuping convulsively. "But I will find him. I will. I'll exonerate myself. I'll move heaven and earth. Otherwise there'll be nothing for it but to blow my brains out." "Very well," Erast Petrovitch said in the same placid tone. "I think I'll question the staff captain a little later when he recovers his composure. But let us make a start with the others now. Tell them to clear the station-master's office for us. I request Mr. Svachinsky and Mr. Burlyaev to be present at the interrogation, and afterwards I shall go and report to His Excellency." The head porter of the train, who had been maintaining a respectful distance, asked timidly, "Your Honour, what are we to do with the body? Such an important person. Where should we take him?" "What do you mean, where?" the State Counsellor asked in surprise. "The morgue carriage will be here any minute. Send him for a post-mortem." And then the Adjutant Modzalevsky, who was the first to recover his wits, ran to the Klin passenger terminal and sent off a coded telegram to the police department. Fandorin's lengthy report was nearing its end. The top hat, mackintosh, and dagger have been sent to the laboratory for analysis. Krapov is in the morgue. Seidlitz has been given a sedative injection. Silence fell in the room, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the quivering of the window panes under the pressure of the stormy February wind. The Governor-General of the ancient capital of Russia, Prince Vladimir Andreevich Dolgorukoy, worked his wrinkled lips intently, tugged on his long-dyed moustache, and scratched himself behind the ear, causing his chestnut wig to slip slightly to one side. Erast Petrovitch had not often had occasion to see the all-powerful master of Russia's old capital in a state of such hopeless bewilderment.
"There's no way the St. Petersburg Camarilla will ever forgive me for this," His Excellency said mournfully. "It won't bother them that their damned Krapov never even reached Moscow. Klin is part of Moscow province too. Well then, Erast Petrovitch, I suppose this is the end."
The State Counsellor merely sighed in reply. Dolgorukoy turned to the liveried servant standing at the door with a silver tray in his hands. The tray held several little bottles and phials, and a small bowl of eucalyptus cough pastils. The servant's name was Frol Grigorievich Vidishev, and he held the modest position of valet. But the prince had no more devoted and experienced adviser than this wizened old man, with his bald cranium, massive sideburns, and gold-rimmed spectacles with thick lenses. There was no one else in the study apart from these three.
"Well, Frolushka," Dolgorukoy asked, his voice trembling, "are we for the scrap-heap, then? Dismissed in dishonour, scandal, and disgrace?" "Vladimir Andreevich," the valet whined miserably, "to hell with the sovereign's service. You've served long and well, thank God, and you're past 80 now. Don't go tormenting yourself over this. The Tsar might not honour you, but the people of Moscow will remember you with a kind word. It's no small thing after all. 25 years you've been looking after them, barely even sleeping at night. Let's go to Nice, to the sunshine. We'll sit on the porch and reminisce about the old days. Why, at our age—" The prince smiled sadly. "I couldn't, Frol. You know that. I'll die without any work to do. I'll pine away in 6 months. It's Moscow that supports me. That's the only reason I'm still hale and hearty. I wouldn't mind if there were good cause, but they'll just throw me out for nothing at all. Everything in my city is in perfect order.
It's unjust. The tray of bottles began rattling in Vedishev's hands, and tears streamed down his cheeks. God is...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?